Well, today we are planning a case of a right mandibulectomy with an immediate fibula, immediate implants, and immediate teeth. And what we're showing here today is how to create the dental prosthesis. And this will be using the floating prosthesis style, which I'm going to show you. So right here, we're in Blue Sky Plan. And on the bottom left here, we're going to choose this model editing. Then that takes us to this next screen. Or on the right, we're going to choose import models. This is where the models that were created from the virtual surgical planning that are sent to you are imported into the software. And I'm selecting all 4 of these models in this case. And I'm holding the control button down to select them all at once. And then I'm going to click OK to bring them in. Now the next screen is going to ask us if we want to align these. And down here at the very bottom, we want to click Skip Alignment. And the reason is when these are exported from the other software, they're already aligned. And these digital STL files have an embedded coordinate system. And so that when you open them up again, they will be aligned here in the software. And we click Skip Alignment, and we'll go to the next screen. And sure enough, everything is aligned here. And so now I'm going to go on the far right. There are these panels. And at the surfaces panel at the very top, this gives us our different models. I'm going to, under visible, uncheck the maxilla, that skull, to get rid of it because we don't need that. In the surfaces panel, if you don't have this surfaces panel, go up to at the top left, the panels drop down menu, and you can choose it from there. And so with this, the first thing we're going to do is this, in my case, these yellow teeth are like a shell, and I'm going to turn off some of those other things. And so this is like a shell. So the first thing we need to do is make these teeth a solid model. And we're going to do you could think of it as a digital pour here, where I'm going to go to, let's see, model manipulation panel on the far right. And the Blue Sky software has kind of a top-down approach to these panels. So we start at the top, and we want to tell it which model we're working with. And this was already selected, this yellow model. Tell it next it's the mandible, it's not the maxilla. Otherwise, it's going to pour it the wrong direction in an inverse. And then moving our way down, I'm going to click this close model. And when I click this, it's going to take a minute, and it's going to make a new model in the surfaces panel. So now it's made this new blue model, and I'm going to go back to the surfaces panel. This yellow one, I'm going to uncheck under this visible tab to get rid of it because we don't really need that anymore. And I'm going to actually X out this yellow one just to keep things a little less cluttered. And then under visible, I'm going to bring this mandible model back in. And so there's a couple things we're going to do here. First of all, we're going to cut away all this blue model over here that we don't need. And we're basically cloning these preoperative teeth to make the prosthesis. He had a molar extracted for a biopsy here, and we're going to add a molar back in there as well. And so the first thing I'm going to do is kind of move this around. So I'm looking at it from the top. And I'm going to choose this dark blue model we just created. And then down here, I'm going to choose this cut tool. And you've always got to choose, before you do the cut tool, choose which model you want to work with, so it knows which model to cut. And then with this, I'm going to go around the blue. And I'm not going to cut it too close here just yet. And when it makes this cut, I'm going to turn off this cut tool again just to move it around a little. And I'm going to make a little cut from the side here. And sometimes you get this error message, which we haven't yet, but if we get that, I'll explain that to you. Now right here, we still have some blue that's going into the, if I toggle that on and off, into that green. So from this angle, maybe we can cut it a little bit closer here. And ultimately, you're going to want to have a small amount of space. I don't know why that didn't cut. Yeah, you're going to want to have a small amount of space between the blue and the green. Otherwise, this is not going to seat. And looking at it from the top, I'll do that. And we'll fine tune this a little bit in Meshmixer also. So here's an error message that you will get. This mesh cut failed. Where it says don't show again, do not click that, because anytime this happens, you want to know about it. So I'm going to click OK. And then we'll turn off this cut tool. And we need to go over here to this model edit panel. And again, if you don't have it, look at this panel's drop down menu up in the main panel up there. So now if I go to this model edit, again, starting from the top down, we want to tell it which model we're working with. And it's this dark blue stone model. Now what this error means is that somewhere, actually I'm going to turn off this green so we can see this. I mean, somewhere the model is open. And actually this is a big hole in the model where I made the cut and it did not seal itself off. And so you can actually see inside the model there. And the problem is this is not 3D printable because it's like a shell that should be solid and not open. So there's this wall that's missing. So I'm going to go down here to this close under the model edit, close all holes. We'll see if it repairs it there. So it just repaired that. So that's something to know, that you're going to get that mesh failed error when you're doing some cuts sometimes. So we're pretty close there. We'll fine tune that a little bit more in Meshmixer. Another thing we're going to do here is add a tooth. So up here at the top, this little plus, it's a plus sign with a tooth, plus tooth. I'm going to do that. It's a second molar. I'm going to choose a first molar just because they're a little bigger in the software. And so I don't think it matters a whole lot. And so to make it similar to that first molar, I may do a little bit of enlarging of this. And we'll do something like that. And we've got the upper teeth here in this skull model. And the occlusion here is actually, on this patient, it's a little strange because he's, this was verified in the mouth. He has a kind of a malocclusion to begin with. And so what I'm looking at here is I just want to make sure it's in rough alignment with how it should be with the top teeth there. And the big thing is I'm just going to make it short because this entire blue prosthesis, we want to make it a little bit short so that it's out of occlusion during the healing period here. And I'm going to do something like that. And it's a little bit shorter than the adjacent tooth, I think. So we'll go with that. I'm going to lengthen this to pull it down into the model. So it's touching the model. Good. So, and now the last thing I'm going to do before we go to Meshmixer is I'm going to make a stent over here, which we call a floating prosthesis. And this is like making a surgical guide for a dental implant, but without an implant. And so at this top right button here, we're in model editing. Go down to advanced. It's going to change your panels and your options and things like that. And the panel we want to have is a guide panel. If you don't have guide panel over on the far right, go up to this panels drop down menu to find it there. And so we're going to make a stent or this guide on the green teeth on the green model. This is the stent that's going to sit on the native dentition. So again, at the top, we tell it that we're working on the mandible. Which model? Now, we've been working with this blue model, but now we're going to switch to the green model. Keep working our way down here. Guide quality, high. And then we're going to skip down to this draw curve. And with this, I'm going to hold the shift key on my keyboard. And I'm going to go from about right here, holding the shift key. And I'm drawing a line here. That's basically outlining where is the guide going to seat. And then we'll try something like that. I'm going to put a window here, which is a block that tells the computer an area to not create the guide or put the guide material, because it can be helpful to make sure that the guide is seated all the way. The other thing that can be nice is at the end of these, I'm going to make a it's a window, but it's at the end of the prosthesis, just to give it kind of a clean, fresh cut there. And it's not as important to do it at this far end there, but where it is important is right up here next to the prosthesis. So I just right clicked to add window, and I'm going to move this around some, and I'm going to make it bigger in most directions. Let's see. Well, mine's got this little bug where those buttons don't stay on for very long, but probably need to reinstall it. But I think we're about there. An important thing here also is you want to have whatever the terminal tooth is there, you want to have it, most of it exposed so that you can visualize the contact point when you're seating this. So that's why I've got this window here to make sure that's exposed. And so now with this, back on this panel on the right, I'm going to click Create Surgical Guide. And if you get these error messages, basically it's saying, hey, you're trying to create a surgical drill guide for an implant, but you haven't placed implants. And anyway, just click these buttons to make that go away. And it's also going to ask you to save the file before you create this guide. And now this is the part, it'll take a minute or two, and actually it can take a few minutes here. This is the lengthiest part of the process, and I'm gonna actually let this run and pause and come right back. And we're back, and this yellow stent is what we've just made here. And so now what we're going to do is export this from Blue Sky. and go to Meshmixer to kind of finish this up. And so go to File, then Export Data. And make sure it's on very high quality. I'm not going to export the maxilla. We're going to export all of these other ones and this tooth here. Then at the bottom, I'm going to click Export here. Now, you have to purchase exports, and it will tell you that one export is going to be deducted here. And you click OK. And that's per case, not per export. So I can go back on this case and export as many different times, as many different files as I want. And it's not going to cost another export. And so when I export this, you want to put it somewhere where you can go back and find it. Good. And then the file that was just exported, I'm going to open that in Meshmixer. And for me, Meshmixer is the default file, or default program to open these STL files. So I just double click on it and I get this. Now this is all one file. When you export from Blue Sky, it exports in one file. So the first thing we're going to do is separate this out, or separate out the individual files. So at the far left, we're going to go to this Edit button. Then I'm going to click Separate Shells. And when you do this, a little window is going to come up called the Object Browser. And now all of these different components are separated as their own file. So I'm going to get rid of a lot of stuff we don't need, like this Ramus piece. And when I click and highlight it, I'm just going to click Delete on my keyboard. And now this piece of fibula, I need to make this, I don't want to completely throw it away, but I want to make it transparent. And so you can see how when you click on different objects on this object browser, it tells you which one. So I'm going to click this eyeball, which is going to make this fibula segment translucent or disappear. And so now these implants, I'm going to delete the actual implants. And, you know, part of these abutments we don't really need either. And now these portions, this large part of the abutments, we do need those, and we want to keep those. And actually, I'm going to combine them together as one. So if I select these on the screen in the objects browser, I can see which ones they are, these three. So now I have one selected. I'm going to hold the control button on the keyboard and select the other two. Now all three are selected. This new menu comes up, and I'm going to click Combine. And it's going to turn them into a single file, which makes them a little bit easier to work with later. And so I'm going to take this stent and turn it off with the little eyeball also. And then a lot of times you've got some extra files down here. If you click these, you don't know what they are, and they're usually little bits of leftover fragments out in space somewhere. So when those were highlighted, I just deleted each one of them. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take this model, this gray model here, and I'm going to fine tune this contact area between these two teeth here. And basically I want to smooth this second premolar in and push it back. So I'm going to go over now with this model selected, not the other models, but with this tooth selected, I'm going to go over here on the far left to sculpt, and then brushes up here. Then under brushes, there's only two tools I really use. There's inflate and there's shrink smooth. And I'm going to choose shrink smooth here. And for the size, I'm going to turn it kind of way down. The strength, that's probably good there. And with this, that makes it a little bit smaller. I'm using this to smooth this prosthesis back a little bit so that there's some space. And because this, what is this kind of whitish part is selected, even though the other model is in the way, seemingly, it's only, you know, the smooth function is only affecting this highlighted white model here. And that's why similarly I can go, it's kind of like going through the gray model here and smooth off the contact where I'm kind of pushing it back a little bit. And you want to end up having a small space, and we're getting really close to being about right here. So I did a little bit too much there, I think. And so I'm going to Control Z on my keyboard, and it should add back some of that missing material right now. There. I'm trying to look at it from different angles. And you can also use the eyeball function on this white model, and I'm going to turn it off and then go back to this just so that that other part's not in the way. And again, sculpt, brushes, shrink smooth, and I may turn down the strength a little to make it a little more subtle right here. That was a lot. Control Z. All right, now I'm going to turn those teeth back on, and that's probably about how you want to have it there. And so now, now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn the fibula back on. There it is. And I'm going to we need to trim this to get it off the fibula a little bit and smooth these edges. But actually, I'm gonna do one thing first. I'm gonna, where you've got this gingiva and so forth coming up around these teeth, kind of like a hybrid prosthesis. We need more of that on this tooth that we added, and so I'm gonna look at it straight from above. And again, with this tooth model selected, I'm gonna go to sculpt, brushes, inflate. So we used shrink smooth before, but now we're going to use inflate. The strength, just have it up high somewhere. Now the size, you need to make fairly large on this. And basically, just to show you an example, I'm going to do it here. And this is some ridiculous, you know, it's always coming towards you. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that, but that's what this inflate tool does. You know, and again, I can do that. You can kind of steer it a little bit, even though it's coming towards you. That was a Control Z again to undo that. And so what I'm going to do is see if I can grow this upwards a little bit around this tooth. That's probably a little much, so I'm going to Control Z to undo that back part. And that's probably enough there. And so so now we want to go and trim off the bottom of this so it's raised up off the fibula a little more. So I'm going to go to Edit. On the far left, Edit, then Plane Cut. And this is going to give us this plane, which we can move around and adjust where we want to make a cut all the way across here. Now, as a general rule, you want to have these abutments sticking down a little bit, because with this certain abutment we planned with, the bottom of these cylinders are positioned where the little feet of the temporary cylinders are going to be positioned. Now, one thing I'm looking at is I can see inside this model, which probably means we're going to get an error. And so I'm going to cancel this. Well, let me show you what we're going to do. I'm going to click accept. And so now this is that mesh problem again. It didn't seal this off. And this is a big enough hole. We can't probably can't just click a button to fix it. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that cut. And we're going to approach this a different way. I'm going to combine this crown, this second molar. First of all, I'm going to combine this crown with these teeth. And so in the objects browser down here, we can see which two these are. So Control button on my keyboard to select both of those. And I'm going to click combine. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take this, this model, and I'm going to go over here to edit and make solid. So the purpose of make solid is, you saw when I was trying to make the plane cut, this was hollow, and make solid will make it so that a plane cut can be performed without that error. Now, one thing about make solid, when I click it, this prosthesis is going to lose some of its resolution. And so let's look. Yeah, not horribly, but some. So it's kind of dumbed down the resolution a little bit. So the way to address that is at the top where it says fast, change that to accurate. Then the solid accuracy, just move it way up here somewhere. Then click update. And it can take a minute for it to think about it. Good, that's a whole lot better there. And I'm going to click accept. And when you click accept, down in this objects browser, it's going to make a new file. It's going to say solid. So that's the one we're working with now. And I'm going to try this plane cut again. So edit, plane cut. And if you look down from below, it's not open. And so this should be a successful cut without an error. And now the other thing to know about the plane cut function, I'm going to change that. So it's kind of subtle, but there's this little blue arrow here. Not this big long one, but there's this kind of fat arrow here. If you click it, now it's over here. This lets you toggle which side of this plane are you keeping and which side are you throwing away. So we want to keep the teeth part and throw away this part down low. So I'm going to click accept there. And then this is kind of rough and bumpy there, so we'll smooth that off. I'm going to get rid of this fibula segment, or just at least turn it off with the eyeball here. Then go back to this tooth segment. And again, sculpt, brush, shrink, smooth. And let's see. I lost it. Sculpt, brushes, shrink, smooth. So I'm going to make this smaller. I'm probably turn the strength up some. And the purpose of this is, let's smooth off this edge here. And when you use this smoothed, shrink smooth tool, there's a slight element of diminishing returns, where if you keep just holding it down, it's not as strong. And I think it has to do with you're making more and more tiny triangles, and so it's harder for the computer to shrink those further. So I'm just going around and rounding off some of this. And in this area here, I might just get rid of this little ledge. I'm going to turn the strength way up and see if I can get rid of this ledge here. You like to have a certain degree of bulk, though, just for prosthetic strength. So, smooth it off as much as you want, and then, now what we're going to do is these 3 abutments, we're going to subtract those from this solid model. And actually this solid model, because I changed it, I'm going to make solid one more time on this. So edit, make solid, change fast to accurate, move that way up there, update. And the reason to do that is because we're about to do a Boolean difference or Boolean subtraction, and you've got to make sure the models are solid. So now I'm going to choose these abutments, and actually before I do that, so I've got 2. So this is, I'm going to get rid of this first thing that says solid that we were working with, because I just used the make solid function again to make this one. So this is the one we want to use for the next step. And so I'm going to actually delete that first one just so it's not confusing. So these abutments, we're going to choose those and make solid. And for these, I think I'm just going to leave them as fast because it's just a geometric cylinder, and going up to accurate is not going to help us. And so now we've got down in the objects browser 2 objects that say solid, and I'm going to choose the teeth, and this is important. Choose the teeth first, then hold the control button down, and then choose the abutments second. And this new window comes up, and at the bottom we have these 3 Boolean functions, and we're going to choose Boolean Difference. And what this is about to do is to subtract the space occupied by these 3 cylinders from the teeth. So when I click that, we have these holes. And those abutments are 6 millimeters in diameter. And the temp copings for most systems are about 3.5 millimeters in diameter. So you've got some room for your pickup material. Now with this window over here, we're going to uncheck both of these boxes, preserve group borders, and then uncheck auto reduce result. Then we're going to click accept. So we have this prosthesis now, and the last thing, if we want to make this floating prosthesis, is I'm going to bring back in, let's see, not that. Here we go. This guide. And there's different ways you can do this. And I'm going to turn off those other teeth. So we just got these. And so with this guide, we'd like to attach have an arm that attaches these together. And the easiest way is to select the guide, then go to sculpt, brushes, inflate, turn the strength all the way up to 100%. And the size, probably in the 30, 35 range here. And so what I'm going to do is on the side, using the inflate, I'm going to draw this thing coming at me and get down to the level of where these the teeth are, where the prosthesis is, and it's always drawing towards me in the screen. So I keep adjusting to kind of look at it and see where am I. Let me go a little more here. Yeah, we'll stop there. And so now, you could draw through the material here. So if I click this and draw towards this, that tooth is blocking, you can't see, but you can do something like that to attach it. But I'm going to Control Z and undo it because I like having these be pretty small these connectors so they break off easy. So I'm going to go to this Meshmix, and which gives us these geometric shapes. And I'm going to choose this kind of barrel shaped one. And I'm going to drag it out here. Now do not drag it out on top of the models, because that does something different. You want to drag it out to the side over here. And this gets kind of tricky here, where you're going to want to move this in to be close to your main object, the prosthesis that we're working with here. And so well, that'll drive you nuts. There. And so under this, the size, I'm actually going to change this manually here, and I'm going to say 2, and then hit the tab button, and 10, and then tab, and then 2. Let's see if we got this right. Yeah, good. And so what we're trying to do is just make this little kind of like a rod or something. And it's 2 millimeters in diameter, 10 millimeters long, which is just an easy starting place. You can grab these squares to make these shorter or longer as you want to. But the first one is the one that you have to play with to get it in the right spot. And so, but once you get that in place, you click accept. And then under this edit, go up to duplicate. And then on my keyboard, I'm going to click T for transform. And then grab this and move it out to right there. That looks about right. And click accept. And then duplicate. T for transform. You can just kind of throw these things out here as much as you want, and then accept. And so accept, there we go. And so now we want to combine all of these things together as one model. So this is a floating prosthesis that sits on the native teeth and suspends these teeth out in space, or suspends the prosthesis out in space in the proper occlusion. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is I want this to be out of occlusion, these teeth. So before I combine all of this together, I'm going to select these teeth, and again on my keyboard, T for transform. And I'm going to translate. I want to move this down. So the direction of this green arrow, I'm going to move this down 1 millimeter. Do 2 if you want to. I'm going to do 1. And I happen to know that this is translate Y. And I'm going to click -1, which is moving it down 1 millimeter. And I'm about to click the return button, and you should see these teeth move downwards about 1 millimeter. So here we go. Yep, there it is. I'm going to click accept. So I'm going to do that before I combine all these together, because I just moved that down relative to the other natural dentition up here. And so now I'm going to select all these things that we just created in the stent, and I'm using the control button on my keyboard in the objects browser to select all of these, and I'm going to click combine. So there we have this floating prosthesis for this case with the holes in the hopefully correct position to do the pickup here. And you can export this for 3D printing, and one good thing to do is analysis here. Before you export it, choose this analysis and then inspector, which you'll see these little globes or balls or spheres that attach to this if you have errors, but there's none here, so that's good. But I'll click Auto Repair All and done. So then we're able to go over here to this export at the bottom to export that for 3D printing. And that's all we have today. Thank you.